this event possible. ELB Learning has been a great partner here in Training Magazine Network for all of our members, and make sure you go to ELB Learning and you can find out all the ways to unlock your employee performance. You're going to see some great things here from ELB Learning today with Karl too. So thank you for joining us here again. The future of learning, isn't content, it's AI simulation, coaching, and judgment with Dr. Karl Kapp. Karl, welcome back to Training Magazine Network.
Thanks, Phil. It's great to be here, and thanks for everybody for coming. And I see so many people in the chat from Pennsylvania, which is really exciting since I'm just kind of up the road there. So Philadelphia and then Laurel Highlands and all that great stuff. So today I really want to talk about looking beyond AI literacy. A lot of people talk about it. A lot of people say we need to have it. I would argue that maybe that's not the most important thing that we should be thinking about. Also,
oh, Karl, you tripped your mute somehow.
I did do that, yeah, and
there we go.
That's the secret to life. Yeah. So I just was mentioning, feel free to contact me on LinkedIn. I have a newsletter that I put out that puts some information about what I'm thinking in terms of the field, what's happening, and it's always good to be connected. So let's go ahead and get started. So really what I want to talk about is what happens when everyone becomes AI literate. And it's not as far off as we think it is. That's the big question. So the belief is that if we have AI literacy and we're all good with AI, we're going to perform better, and then we'll have better business outcomes, and the world will be a better place. But actually, that's not how this is going to work. That's, I think, a very wrong assumption. So AI literacy might be necessary, but it's certainly not sufficient for better organizational performance. In fact, we've been down this road before, right? We've all seen the people that had the cell phones, and they're really good and into it, and they had the technical advantage, but then all of a sudden everybody had a cell phone or smartphone even, and so it was no longer an advantage. Then things like Excel came along, and everybody was like, oh, Excel, that's great, but it doesn't make everybody a business genius. So what's the deal? Well, content was once the king. We once said, hey, if we have the right content that nobody else has, and we learn it better than anybody else, we're going to be in an advantage. And that was true up until very recently, right? We had books only. Remember the printing press? Well, you probably don't remember, and I almost remember, but when the printing press came out, books were very valuable, and we put them in libraries, and only certain people could access the libraries and go to the libraries. And when we had another level, they said universities. So you'll study from these books, and we'll give you the information, we'll give you the content, but only if you come to the university. And corporate training kind of grew out of that and said, hey, I'm the corporate university. I'm kind of going there and that kind of stuff. And then finally, search engines, right? Google gave us access to everything. So hopefully everybody is in good shape with that. So then all of a sudden AI happened, right? Reports, videos, articles, courses, everything. And content is now infinite at virtually no cost. You can make any content anytime you want, not a problem. So the bottleneck is no longer content creation. What is it? It's judgment, it's critical thinking, it's problem solving, right? If content is a commodity, which is when something becomes abundant, it becomes less valuable, why are we still designing learning around courses? That seems not to be a focus that we should think about. In fact, the real work of learning and development is no longer content creation. I would assert it's capability building. What we're being asked now to do is create the capability within the workforce to do their jobs. When they can grab a smartphone and get the content or information, then what really is the strategic advantage is us helping others be more capable at what they're performing. So, if content isn't king, what is king? I would argue judgment is king, something that AI cannot do. An organization that is going to thrive is going to be one that invests in human judgment, invests in collaboration, leadership, and critical thinking alongside AI capabilities. That's what's going to make the difference. So here's what really struck me one day, and it's something that AI can't work out, right? So these are AI generated slides. I used AI slides on purpose, so you might recognize it if you use Claude. You're like, oh yeah, that looks like an AI generated slide that Dr. Kapp is using. But what AI can't do is make these connections and solve these problems. And I want to give this example. US News in 2025 did a leadership poll and said, who are the leaders of the organizations? Like, do people trust them? And 72% of people said they were disappointed in business leaders. 72%. And don't think that you're getting away with this if you're in public service. 80% are disappointed with public service leaders. And you're like, well, that's okay. I'm in education. 68% of people are disappointed with education leaders. And you're like, okay, I'm in the health services, so that should be fine. 73% are disappointed with those leaders. So we've got this leadership crisis, and I don't think this is a secret that I'm sharing with anybody, but this is one piece of data that I saw, like, okay, people are disappointed in business leaders. And then this other piece of data kind of really struck me. This is from Harvard Business Review, and it's talking about a leadership problem. And it said companies, in order to solve leadership problems, are number one focused. We asked them to rank. They said the highest ranking item was scalability of the leadership program. Like, if we could only scale our leadership. What came in second was post-program sustainment. Third was customization. Fourth was quality of content. And fifth was measurement of effectiveness. So basically what they're saying is, we care more about the scalability of our programs than we do about the quality. We care more about the scalability of the program than we do its effectiveness. We care more about the scalability of the program than we do scalability of sustainment, right? So those are issues, right, that we're not addressing. We are going for scalability, which means, hey, let's train everybody in leadership. I don't care what it looks like. I don't care what they can do. They just need to be trained in leadership. And I don't care if we sustain that, but we don't care, right? Scalability, while it seems to be a good thing, and in some cases it is, but if we scale garbage, then we're just scaling failure at a more effective, more efficient rate. So we need to think about scaling is good, but we got to scale quality. And I think that's where instructional designers come in. I saw a lot of you are instructional designers. If we don't design the right training experiences, the right capability building experiences, then we're missing the point. So let's take a look at what can happen. So what we need to teach, I'm arguing, is good judgment, because our leaders do not have good judgment. And if we're not measuring effectiveness, how do we know they're having good judgment, right? So let's talk about a minute. What is judgment? Judgment is not just intelligence or experience, but it's the ability to combine knowledge, context, and discernment to make sound choices in unsound times, right? So we have all these inputs that go into judgment. Learning is certainly there. You have to have some knowledge and information. But you also have to have trust. And it's not just trust, but you also have to have that experience. And then you have to step back and be detached. You have to have options and think through those options, and then you have to deliver the decision. And the interesting thing about this, when we think about good judgment, is that The process elements are really the filters. So the input, this is kind of like a amorphous diagram here, because basically you have to use detachment to tell which learning makes the right sense, right? You can't be emotionally involved like, oh, that was a great training class. I loved it. I loved everything they said. But if it wasn't 100% right or doesn't apply to the situation, it's not as effective. And then options, right? You have to have the full range of choices and consider the consequences, first and second order consequences. And how do we know this is a crisis? Well, because we have CEOs firing employees via email. Like, is that good judgment? No, right? So we've got this issue of what we need to do. And so the old scarcity in the environment that we used to work in as learning and development creators was scarcity of content. Like, I can only make so many content. I can only do so many courses a year. I can only create so many classes. Information, there's a lot. How do I get the right information to the right person? How do I get the right answers, right? We developed this thing called frequently asked questions. Summarize. None of that is scarce anymore. There's no scarcity of that. What is scarce is judgment, critical thinking, collaboration, decision-making, and leadership. These are the elements that we really need to consider as we go through the new scarcity of our environment. And if you look at these are truly human skills. So remember those two pieces of data? Hey, these 72% of people are disappointed with leadership, and we are more concerned about leadership scaling than anything else. I put those together. I use my judgment to say, look, those two things together are a problem. And then I use critical thinking to think about how to solve it. AI is not doing critical thinking. It's not actually judgment. Critical thinking means, to me, Mohammed, is putting the dots together, like connecting this and this and this and this. Judgment is then making a sound decision. So critical thinking can contribute to judgment, right? But judgment is actually where you weigh the value, right, of whether or not you should do A or B. And that happens typically in an environment that does not have a clear-cut answer. One of the problems with a lot of our education systems, and I'm part of that too, so it's part on me, is that we value right and wrong answers more than anything. We want the learner to have a right answer. There's a right answer to do this. There's a wrong answer to do this, right? So we get into that. But once we get into the real world, right and wrong answers, no, it's a better choice, a less bad choice. It's a choice I think is going to be correct. I'm going to use my judgment and say we're going to do this. Whether or not it actually works, we're not sure, right? So we have those types of issues. What we should be thinking about is the reasoning behind those issues. So instead of rewarding someone for an outcome, we need to reward them and think about, well, what was the process you used to get to that outcome? And let's scrutinize the process, not the outcome. Because the process might be right, the outcome still could be wrong. Or the process could be wrong, the outcome still could be right this time, right? So we need to think about that. So collaboration, decision-making, leadership are also very scarce nowadays. And we know leadership's scarce because 72% of people don't think leadership is really the thing. So if we look at the judgment gap, I mean, we can really look at it this way. We have data, tons of data. We have more data now than we've ever had in our lives. I mean, Apollo 13 had less data and information in it to go to the moon and back than your smartphone. So we've got the data. We've got the information. We even oftentimes are arguing that we've got some knowledge and even some understanding, but we're breaking down at the higher levels, knowledge, and then ultimately wisdom, although talking about wisdom in a business context isn't necessarily the thing to do here. So we'll set that aside, although I think there's a place for it. But think about the higher up you go in this hierarchy, the more uniquely human the skill is. And the more we need to develop training around that skill. And so that's really what we need to be thinking about and need to be pondering. So what do humans own? So what do humans own? Judgment, and they own context. So what do we mean by context? It means that's your understanding of your organization. So for example, you may use AI to create an outline for a training course. But what AI might not know is that the guy up in Syracuse has been running a rogue training course already and has some good content that could be used. You know that as the designer of the instruction. AI doesn't know that, right? Doesn't know the context. So one of the things that we need to hold on to and think about is the context. And I would urge everyone, because everyone's concerned about like what's happening with AI, what's it going to do to my instructional design position, that kind of stuff. I would urge you to start keeping a journal of these 4 items. Okay, so what judgment did you use today? What elements of judgment did you use today, right? Did you make any decisions that involve thinking about ethics or thinking about weighing trade-offs or thinking about not having the right answer? What kind of things did you have to do? Then think about the context. Write up every day a little bit of a context. You might not have to do that every day, but what's the context of which learning happens in your organization? Is the context one of excitement? Is the context one of confusion? That kind of stuff. And then look at relationships. Are you building trust, empathy, and a human connection with people in your organization? I just read an article today on NPR that said that one of the victims of the COVID epidemic is people, yes, are working from home, but they feel more lonely and isolated and disconnected than ever before. And so kind of building those relationships. And then finally, critical thinking. What critical thinking skills or issues did you solve today? Or do you need to solve? So just keep that little journal. Journaling is very helpful, and it's very it's very thought inducing, because what we forget is that writing is an act of thinking, putting our skills together, putting our ideas together, making things happen. So we need to think about how we can leverage that. Okay, so our new mission of L&D, if you should choose to take it, which I think is really kind of important, is we've got to build this capability. I'm going to talk about how to do that as well. So we'll talk about building that capability. Then we need to enable our learners to perform. That's really important. And then we have to measure behavior change. AI right now cannot measure behavior change. So we need to measure the behavior change. Then we need to design practices into what people are doing. And then we need to embed the learning into the workforce. And that's some really important kinds of things that can happen. So let's go ahead and talk about that. So we need a learning model that challenges learners. We need to present them with a real world scenario that requires judgment. It can't be a scenario where, oh, here's the right, okay, what do you think? What do you think? Okay, well, here's the right answer. No. We want to say, well, how did you come to that answer? What kind of decisions, what kind of information factored into that? What were the first order effects, second order effects? Then practice, attempt with the task, and AI can do that now. Then think about feedback, and then think about reflection, and then because we often don't reflect on our actions. I always say that learning without reflection is just an experience. So we want to have more than just an experience. We want to have that element of reflection, and then you want to have a retry with improvement. What AI can do in this model is it can actually solve Bloom's 2 sigma problem. So Bloom, the same guy that came up with the taxonomy. Actually, he didn't come up with it. He had a bunch of grad students work on it. Maybe he had the concept, but a lot of people did work on Bloom, not just the one guy. And Bloom also did a study, or had one of his grad students do a study, actually, on performance, learning performance. And he looked at classrooms and he looked at people with tutors and found that people who had tutors did 2 standard deviations better on average than people that were in a traditional classroom environment. So the idea there is that the people who were tutored did better. Now, the problem that we have is that tutoring is not scalable, right? Not scalable. But AI is scalable. And if we design it right, we are scaling capability building in our training. And that, I think, is kind of exciting, right? It seems time intensive and it seems expensive, right? When you have an individual tutor, but if you can do it with AI, you can do it ad infinitum. And so that's what we're going to see. We're going to see that if we, back to Cordella's comment, right? It's expensive. Yeah. The old model is coaching is expensive and it's scarce. And then practice is limited by schedule. So we have to stop everything we're doing, practice, and come back. Feedback is typically generic, or it's very expensive to give, and it's very difficult to scale. Now, again, earlier I kind of made fun of scaling leadership training. It needs to be scaled, but it needs to be scaled at quality, not just because it can be scaled, right? Let's not do it just so you can do it. So let's take a look at kind of what is happening in terms of coaching. We can use AI-powered skills. We can do practice that can be available 24/7. We can do feedback, and we can actually scale things, right? So let's look at what can be done. So AI is where you perform your task. Somebody observes it, which is AI. You get feedback. You practice skills. We'll come back to this. Right now, Phil, if you could load the video, we'll all watch me interacting with an AI tutor. So here you go. This is me. So this is using a tool called Rehearsal. And how you set up Rehearsal is that you need to go behind the scenes and set up a situation. So I set up a retail situation where someone is actually going into a store and they're returning an item and they want to get cash back, but they can't. You can only get store credit. So that's a typical situation that happens. And so how do you scale for that? So let's take a look. So I'm going to stop right here. On the left-hand side is the AI bot that I'm interacting with. Her name's Alex. I'm recording myself on the right-hand side so I can get feedback on that. And I can set this up to just be like a conversation, or I've set this up so I can see my goals on the right-hand side. You know, we're scaffolding the practice. And then down below, I can see insights or ideas there as well. So let's go ahead and continue.
Hi, I need to return this item, but I don't have the receipt. Can you help me with that?
Well, we usually don't accept return items without receipt, so that might be a problem.
Hello, I understand you're looking to return an item without a receipt. While I can't offer a cash refund, I can help you with store credit, which you can use.
So once you're done, it's going to analyze that information that you just did, and it lets you practice again and again. So here is me. Okay, so that time maybe I asked the wrong question, didn't do that well. And so now I'm going to do it again. So this is a tool called Scenario, which I'm sorry, it's a scenario, but it's a tool called Release. I see Sarah's asking a question about that. So I used Release, and what I did was I set up a scenario.
How can I help you?
It has an AI assist. And so it allowed me to actually set that up.
Hi, I'm trying to return this item, but I don't have the receipt. I was hoping to get a cash refund, but I understand there might be some issues with that. Can you help me out?
Yes, I'd be glad to. Unfortunately, the store policy is not to accept returns without a receipt for cash back, but we could do a store return for a similar item if you'd like.
I understand policies are in place for a reason, but it feels a bit unfair since I can't get my money back. Is there any way to make this work better for me?
I know that feels unfair. I'm sorry about that, and I wish I could do something about you not having a receipt. But we've got some great merchandise, and we're having a sale next week, so you actually might get a better deal than you would just returning it for cash. Okay, so this can go on and on. So a couple of things I want to say about this is that the sales model or the framework that you use, the elements of the situation, the background of the character, the storefront that you're in, all of that is you. Meaning the instructional designer creates that situation. So someone said, well, what if it's like an edge case, right? Or this is great for common scenarios, but what if it's an uncommon scenario? You can actually develop an uncommon scenario. You actually put information in there. Now, this is a situation here where, we want the sales reps to perform certain actions. And so it's very scripted about what you can actually respond to a sales rep. But let's say that you were doing it for leadership. If you were doing leadership, you would add leadership principles. And so maybe it's not exact scripting or content or words that you want somebody to say, but it is elements of that script or elements of that model that you want them to mimic, right? So that's the element that you can do there. I'll also say that in order for this to happen, let's go back to the slides. So in order for this to happen, I used AI-assisted authoring. So one of the complaints, again, I get from people all the time is like, I don't have time to write scenarios. I don't have time to write a backstory for a character. I don't have time to write because I'm too busy often creating content, right? But it happens, right? So here is the information that I put in there. So on the right-hand side are the parameters that I need to put in. And the parameters are, who's the learner? So I talk about who the learner is and what happens and how that works. And then it says, what skills are they practicing? So I can put in the skills. And then it says, what's the success look like? And so I have to design all of that. So if you go back to saying, hey, I don't need to know how to write a good prompt, or, prompting's for whatever. I don't need, you actually do. You should know how to write a good prompt because this is basically you're prompting the AI. So you need to do this. The other thing that you can do, and that I think is very helpful, is that you can upload documents. So if you have a leadership policy, if you have decisions that leaders have made before that were good decisions, if you have elements that you want to put in there for what the leaders should consider, you can upload all of those documents. And when you upload those documents, then it uses that information for your conversation. So it's really important to do that because then you can be coached through that process individually. And then the manager can see how you're doing or can see across a whole element. So that's always helpful. So that can be helpful. Yeah. So I'm using a tool called Rehearsal. I saw this question come up a bunch. It's Rehearsal, and it's by ELB. So if you're already, a customer of ELB, you probably I don't know anything about that. Maybe upgrade or get a version of it. You could do this with ChatGPT. It just doesn't have the avatar associated with it at the moment. It's the idea of practicing, getting feedback, practicing again, and improving what you're doing. So those are all ways in which you can build capacity. So now I take that leadership training. It's our job to make sure that it's measurable, right? That we're doing the right model, the right leadership. We're adding wisdom and we're adding judgment in there. We're adding problem solving and decision making. And now we scale it. Don't scale it before that. Scale it after you get the quality in there, and that will help increase the quality and then give you the feedback that you need. So here's just my setup screen. But this, see, notice where it says goals. So these are the goals. So the question was like, how does this get set up? So basically what happens is I, as the designer of instruction, set up the scenario. I, as the designer of instruction, set up the situation that's going to happen. I name the characters. I upload corporate policy information. I'm responsible for all of that. And so when I'm responsible for that, that's where the instructional design comes in. So people oftentimes are like, oh, we'll just use an AI tool to do AI role plays. That's awesome. Yeah, but no, if you don't have an instructional designer designing that role play, it's going to be a crappy role play. So you've got to design it knowing everything you know about instructional design, and that will be really helpful. So Phil, I'm going to share my screen. So let's go to that mode. And so some people are asking a little bit about kind of the back reporting here. So I want to just show that real briefly. So here's the screen. So here is my session that I'm in. Now, individually, I can see my history of what I've been doing. So I can see my average time, my completion rate, my success in reaching the goals, and my improvement. I am not improving at all, as you can see. So I need to practice more. And here you can see all of my sessions. And if I want to go in here for this session, I can practice again, but I can also see here were the goals of the session. Calm the customer's emotion. I didn't do that. Acknowledge the customer's frustration. Didn't do that. Reframe the conversation. Didn't do that. But I was clear in my communication, so that's good. I partially call control, and I partially talked about the credit, but I didn't do it as well as maybe I should have. So as a manager or as my own employee here, I can come in and I can see, oh, how many sessions did Karl do? What was Karl's best score? What was the average score? What was the average completion rate of that? And let me kind of look through there. Who's the top performer? Oh, it's Karl. Also, hint, he's the low performer because he's only one so far that did that. But here is now a visual depiction. Average completion rate, highest, lowest. So as a training professional, you can keep track of what's happening with this. And where's our role? Again, as training professionals is, hey, if Karl is not meeting his goals, then this isn't working for him, right? So I need to pull him aside. I need to give him different kinds of instruction. Then I can do the individual coaching. I don't have to coach all 150 people. I only have to coach the ones that this tool's not working for. And so now it allows me as a designer of training to create that. I'm also able to see if I go back in and look at those goals and find out that 90% of the people are not calming down the customer. I know I've got to have training on calming down the customer. That's the kind of information that would be helpful for me. So this gives me, as the designer of the instruction, an amazing amount of flexibility to add elements into the learning experience that maybe I couldn't do before. Maybe before I'm like, hey, I just have to train 150 people on how to deal with customer service. Okay, that's good. Now you design quality instruction, you design a follow-up plan, you design these scenarios, and then you manage by exception. You look at what the problems might be, you look where the elements might be. Those are the kind of things that we can do now as designers of instruction by looking through the reporting and the sessions and all that good information. We could download it to spreadsheet, which is kind of full circle from what we talked about before. We can look at learners. So lots of different things that we can do to help with this instruction. Okay, so I'm done sharing. I'm coming back to my slide deck. I don't know, Rachel, if you can program right to the point where they become that aggressive, but perhaps. Interesting. And then there I am. And then again, the nice thing about this, I can look at insights, I can look at the goals, I can see what the conversation is, I can hear the conversation. So you can do that in a lot of different ways. So where can we be doing this, right? We could look at the AI as a simulation engine for lots of things that we were doing. So this works really well to build sales capabilities. The problem I see a lot of times with salespeople is they don't like training because they've been doing sales for 15 years and they know everything there is about sales. They have 15 years of experience. But I always say to the salespeople, do you have 15 years of experience or do you have 1 year of experience 15 times over, right? That, you know, you tell me you can never get better. I always use the analogy of Tom Brady, right? Arguably one of the best American football players ever. And Tom Brady talked about how he loved practice. He actually loved practice. He said sometimes more than the games. And so that was really kind of interesting insight that he had, but it's very true because that's what makes you better. You look at leadership, customer service, negotiation, compliance, project management, all of those, if we think about that, are truly human skills that we need to have. So that can be really important to do that. Now, Marlon brings up a good question, right? What about, role plays with emotions? I view using these tools in a progression. So what I mean by that is your airplane pilot on your 747 or your Boeing aircraft was trained on a flight simulator, but they were not trained on a simulator, given an aircraft right away and said, go fly people all over the world. There was a progression. Okay, you learned the content knowledge, you got in a simulator in so many hours, then you had to fly as a co-pilot, then you had to fly so many hours in short flights, then you had another test, then you had more simulation time, and then you do that, right? So you have that. We need to do that. This is, Marlon has the same point. I guess I'm making the same point. I'm trying to read comments, present, and answer questions all at the same time. So maybe I didn't catch all of your comment, but thanks. But yeah, that's the idea. So brought to light the really good point that we need to view this as progression. Again, this is where our judgment comes in, right? Our judgment about what we want to instruct. Now, I have another example I want to show. So let's go back into sharing of the screens. And let's check this out. Now, this is sharing of a tool, using a tool called Scenario VR. And in this tool, it's a 3D virtual, a 360 virtual video. And so one of the ideas behind training is let's make the situation as realistic as possible. And again, this is a continuation. So eventually the learners here will actually, these are students at the university in nursing, will actually work on the mannequin. But before they ever work and then actually do clinics in actual hospitals. But before we do that, we want to minimize their probability of making mistakes. And we want to maximize their comfort level with this kind of environment. So here you're a college student who has become ill and is in part suspected of a meningitis outbreak. You have to visit the places that she visited to see what happens, right? So you get a sense of the room. Now, why is this so important? Because you want people to feel comfortable in the environment in which they need to work. So for example, we often do safety training on a linear slide-by-slide module. But the people working on the construction site aren't looking at linear PowerPoint. They're looking at a 360 environment where they have to look for danger all around them. If I'm a medical professional and I'm looking for the origin of an illness, I've got to go into people's bathrooms, as messy and sloppy as they are. I got to do that because I've got to look for possible elements where infection happens. So here that you can do, like sharing drinks is not good. Lip products is not good. Sitting near someone outdoors is fine, but kissing, always a danger. And yeah. And so this gives me the experience of going through here. I'm going to answer this question. And then I can go to other areas like the dorm room, the classroom. You know, where are elements of infection in the classroom? Where are some dangerous areas there? So again, my capability, my capacity by putting me in the environment in which I need to operate. And the neat thing about 360 video, I've been doing this for a long time. So when we first created 360 video, it was a nightmare. Moving the camera, pictures, you had to have a special package to stitch them together. It wasn't pretty. Now you take a camera, you put it in the middle of the room, you leave the room, and you're done. That's it. The software then. So people say, "Oh, Karl, 360 video expensive." No, the camera maybe $400, software very inexpensive, and then all of a sudden you've got the environment you immerse the learner in. You don't have to have special tools, etc. And the better thing is, another good thing is, with AI now, AI can create this 360 environment for me. Even go take a picture. So to stop sharing, back to my slides. I can about stuff all day, but unfortunately, we don't have time. So I'm trying to stop sharing.
And Karl, there was a bit of a lag while you were sharing that, just because of bandwidth. So that's I stopped your camera momentarily, but
Okay.
yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, okay, great. No, that's okay. So I really want you to think about what type of things. Yeah, Michelle. Yeah, we are actually using that with one of our folks on a shop floor. Exactly, they're making paper products. So the question: how do we create that? Preeta, maybe I'll let you answer that question as I kind of continue up on the finish here. But it's Scenario VR was the tool, and just a 360 camera. So we need to think about the future of L&D. We need to move from content to capabilities. We need to teach people to be capable of solving problems, capable of exercising good judgment, capable of handling decisions that need to be made. We need to move from courses to coaches. How can we create these coaches that are going to help learners through specific situations? And then from information to performance, how are we going to help these people perform at a higher level? That's what we want to think about. I like to ask the question, what does the learner need to do tomorrow morning at 10:15 a.m.? And am I preparing them to do that? If I can answer the question yes at 10:15 a.m., I'm good. If I can't, then that is a problem. Actually, I have a scenario somewhere on Scenario VR on my YouTube channel. If you follow me on a YouTube channel, also if you follow me on LinkedIn, I can also post some stuff there that you can take a look at. So the question really to answer is, if AI can create content in seconds, why are we still designing learning around content? Why? The real work of L&D now is no longer curation of content. It's capacity building, capability building. Can we create that capability in our learners? That's what we need to think about. That's what we need to do. So where does the future belong? It belongs to not organizations with the best prompts, not the best content, but employees who can interpret, question, adapt, decide, and act. And where do we fit in? If we can help employees interpret, questions, adapt, decide, and act, that's the sweet spot. That's the spot structural designers right now in this crazy world of AI need to be occupying. And I think we can do it. We've got the tools to do it. We've got the knowledge to do it. We've got the inclination, I think, and a lot of times to do it. So I don't think anybody's in a better situation than we are to help organizations into the future. Human judgment and problem solving is going to determine which organizations, and I would argue which individuals, are going to succeed. If we can improve our own judgment, if we can improve the judgment of others, if we can solve problems, if we can connect the dots, we can definitely do this. Yeah, Troy, absolutely. So there's rehearsal. I know a lot of people were asking about it, so you can go ahead and check that out. Go ahead and scan that code. And as you're doing that, I left the last 10 minutes for questions. It's never enough time, but we can probably get some good questions in there. So if you have questions that I missed, I try to catch a lot during the conversation. But if I missed something, please type it in the chat and I'll be happy to answer.
Karl, amazing stuff here. Thank you so much for all of the demonstrations and the thought-provoking content here of everything AI in the world right now. So now's your chance to pick Karl's brain on anything that you just saw. Daryl, I agree. And Karl, did you want to do any of the polling, or are we okay with it?
Oh, I totally forgot that. Yeah,
yeah,
no,
right.
We don't need to.
Okay. We had polls for you, but Karl had so much to share. Well, maybe next time, Karl. Right in the next, I'm sure you'll be coming back. But yeah, please put your questions in for Karl.
Yeah. So Susan asked an interesting question. So I was working with a company that was using an AI coaching tool like this for sales reps. And the guy said the reps are using the tool like 15 times a day. They just love it. So the interesting thing to me is, these are all skilled reps who've been doing it for a while, but nobody wants to admit they don't know something. Nobody wants to do a role play in front of other people. Nobody, all that's kind of awkward. Here, I can do it in the safety of my own home, so to speak, right? And so I can actually, well, thanks, Troy. Yeah, I'm actually working on another book, so that's going to be out here, I hope, by the end of the summer. But the idea of people wanting to practice and wanting to get better, I think, is a really good thing. And if we put that in there, we can do that really quite effectively. Well, Pratik, I don't know if it's a better tool. Like, how can you just throw that out there? How about some evidence, some stats, some research? They're all good tools. What I found is some tools do things really well. Some tools do things not as well. So, we can always leverage our tools. What I find a lot, actually, in terms of tools, is that in organizations, we often have the tool, we don't use it to its fullest. So I like to say, like, take a look at Microsoft Word. Like, how much of Microsoft Word are you actually using? Is it 10%, 20%, right? So you've got tools, use them well. But lots of tools can do well. I don't have the aggressive markers. So was asked, do you have an estimate of how long it takes you to build out a scenario? So it depends on the level of complexity. I often